Have you ever just looked around and wondered why people are so different? Why we have this incredible diversity of traits? Well, the answers, our entire history, our migrations, our adaptations, it's all written right there in our DNA. And today, we're going to unlock that code by diving into the amazing field of population genetics.
So, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the big puzzle of human variation. Then, we'll define our key terms. After that, we'll check out a model for a population that's not changing, which, believe it or not, helps us understand the real forces of evolution. And finally, we'll see how it all works in the real world.
All right, let's kick things off with the big question that drives this entire field. It's a puzzle that starts small, with our own families, but it scales up to cover the whole planet.
Right. This is the core mystery we're trying to solve. We all know you get your eye color from your parents, right? Traits are passed down. But we also see these huge, broad patterns of traits that differ between populations all over the world. So how do we explain all of this variation, both on the tiny family scale and on the massive global scale?
It all starts right here, with inheritance. Traits get passed down from parents to their kids. But look at this diagram. It's not just simple copying. You get a mix, and these new combinations of traits create variation, even within a single family. This is really the raw material for all genetic diversity.
So we can look at all this variation on two different levels. We can zoom in and study the differences within a single population, all the variety you'd see among people in one town. Or we can zoom out and compare the average differences between totally separate populations. You really need both of these perspectives to get the full picture.
Okay, so we've got the puzzle figured out. Now let's talk about the tools we use to actually solve it. This is where the science of population genetics really shines.
Here's the textbook definition. Now, if you're studying for an exam, there are two phrases here you absolutely have to remember. Frequency, which just means how common something is, and change over time. That's it. Population genetics is all about measuring how the genetic recipe of a group changes from one generation to the next.
Now, to talk about gene frequency, we need to know what an allele is. It's actually super simple. It's just a specific version of a gene. So if you have a gene for eye color, the different flavors, the actual code for blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes, those are the alleles.
So your genotype, that's your personal genetic recipe for any given trait. You get one set of instructions from each parent, so you have two alleles for every gene. The specific pair you ended up with, say one allele for brown eyes and one for blue, that combination is your genotype.
And this right here, this is the mic drop moment. When we strip it all down, this is what evolution is. It's not some vague, mysterious force. It's a measurable, statistical shift in how common certain alleles and genotypes are in a population over time. That's the whole game.
Now, this might sound a little backward, but stick with me. To understand change, you first need to know what no change looks like. It's like having a control group in an experiment. In population genetics, our control group is something called the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, and it's an incredibly useful idea.
So what this principle describes is a perfect, imaginary population where the allele frequencies are totally stable. They just don't change, generation after generation. It's a mathematical model of a population that is not evolving at all.
Now, for this perfect stability to happen, 5 super strict rules have to be followed. No new mutations can pop up. Natural selection can't favor any particular trait. Nobody can move into or out of the population. Mating has to be completely random, and the population has to be massive, basically infinite, to avoid random statistical flukes. As you can probably guess, in the real world, this never happens.
So if the real world never actually meets those 5 conditions, what happens when they get broken? Well, that's where the action is, because every time one of those rules is broken, it's actually a force of evolution.
And that's the reality check, right? Nature isn't a sealed-off laboratory. Populations are messy, environments are always changing, and individuals are always on the move. That stable equilibrium is just the ideal model. Constant change is the reality.
Exactly. So when a real population violates those conditions, its allele frequencies start to shift. And those violations, those are the very engines that drive evolution forward. And here they are, the forces of evolution. Mutation introduces brand new alleles. Natural selection gives a boost to alleles that help with survival. Gene flow is just migration, moving alleles between populations. Genetic drift is pure random chance, and it has a much bigger impact in small populations. And non-random mating means individuals are making choices, which shifts which genes get passed on. These are the things that are constantly pushing and pulling on a population, causing it to evolve.
Okay, enough with the theory for a second. Let's make this real. How do scientists actually use all of these principles? Let's take a look at a classic, everyday example and see the real-world impact of this science.
The ABO blood group system is a perfect example of this stuff in action. We've got different alleles, A, B, and O, and they determine what kind of markers or antigens are on your red blood cells. Your specific genotype, the combination of alleles you inherited, determines whether your blood type is A, B, AB, or O.
And here's the really cool part. We can actually measure the frequency of these blood type alleles in any population on Earth. Geneticists use mathematical formulas, just like the ones you see here, to calculate exactly how common each allele is. This turns a simple observation into cold, hard data.
And this shows you how it works. You can go out, take a sample from a real population, and calculate the actual frequencies of the genotypes you find. The key step is then comparing your real-world numbers to what the Hardy-Weinberg model predicts they should be. If they don't match up, bam! You've got solid evidence that one of those evolutionary forces is at work.
So why do we care about any of this? Because it's not just some abstract theory. Population genetics has incredibly powerful real-world applications. It helps us trace ancient human migrations. It's used in forensics to solve crimes. It's how paternity tests work. It helps us understand genetic diseases. And ultimately, it lets us piece together the entire epic story of human evolution.
This famous quote from the biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky just says it all, doesn't it? Understanding these mechanisms of evolution through the lens of population genetics, it's the foundation for making sense of pretty much the entire living world.
It really makes you think, right? The history of our ancestors, all of their journeys, their struggles, their triumphs and adaptations, it's all recorded in the genetic patterns within our own communities right now, just waiting to be read. What story is your genetic code waiting to tell?